Patriotism doesn't come from fear or hatred. Today, saying Jai Shri Ram comes from hatred and patriotism of a completely false nature. It cannot come out of insecurity. I was talking about insecurity earlier. This comes out of insecurity, vileness, and hatred. Papa and Homi and Amma and so many others wanted to not only build India into a great nation, but build for humanity.
Firstly, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here. I've been trying to do this interview right since I watched the series. When were you first approached for the series, and what was your journey like during the making of it?
I think they first came to us about 2.5 years ago, certainly before COVID. And my nephew Shad Ali, who works very closely with Nikhil Advani, called and said that a very close friend of mine called Nikhil Advani wants to come and see you because he wants to do a serial or something for one of the OTT platforms on your father, and will you see them? So about 8 of them arrived, including Siddharth Roy Kapoor and several others in the team. And they basically told us what they wanted to do, which is that they wanted people who were genuinely part of the building of India, people who were real, and people who had dedicated their lives to the country and to the scientific fields to become exciting icons for your generation. And that your generation really knew very little about people like that. And all they saw was people committing fraud and becoming heroes, people killing people and becoming heroes, people raping people and becoming heroes, because that's what the OTT platforms actually show. And that we really had a need for something else, and a good representation and a good iconic sort of figures that people could relate to. And that they didn't want to do it without the family's participation, and they didn't want to do it without our approval. So would we agree? And listening to them, we felt that they really wanted to do something that we would be very happy for them to do. And then they said that would one of us work with them closely on the scripting so that they didn't get anything wrong. And because I'm the most involved with cinema and filmmaking and so on, I was the one who got involved.
So what was your journey like during the making of the series?
Fun. They were incredibly respectful, tender. They really wanted Papa's and the families and Amma's characters to come out as they genuinely were. So from talking to them at length about each of the characters, Papa, Amma, but also Dadaji and Dadima, and the kind of world they lived in, sharing pictures, sharing memories, getting them to talk to Dr. Padmanabh Joshi, who is the person whose PhD is on Papa and who for the last 50 years has devoted his time in gathering together papers and lectures and writings on Papa, by Papa. His PhD is on his institution building. So from the institutional point of view, Padmanabh was telling them. From the personal point of view, I was talking to them. And they sent me draft after draft of the script, and I would actually correct each one and say, this is not how this happened, or this is not how they would behave. This is not what Papa called Dadaji. For instance, simple things like that. Or this is not the kind of sari Amma would ever wear. The setting people came to Ahmedabad, the costume designer came to Ahmedabad. I shared with them Amma's costumes. I shared with them the kind of colors Papa would wear, how Amma used to choose his clothes, the kind of things that would be on their bedside, or the kind of things that they would have in their house, which was very different from Homi's house, because the two families were, in that sense, Homi's was a very British Parsi household. And both Amma's family and my father's family were very Swadeshi, very much into the Indian aesthetic, very much into handlooms and khadi and handmade and so on. And that gets reflected in the series as well. But they always listened to me every single time. And then there were times when they would come to me and said, ma'am, this needs to be changed because from the story point of view, from the climax point of view, we need to change dates around a little. Is it okay? And then we said, yes, it's okay, as long as the facts remain the same.
So what was your experience growing up in the Sarabhai household?
Freedom, a push to have an opinion always, to never sit on the wall, so to speak, about issues, about choices, to be listened to even as a child, as somebody in the family who had an opinion, to be seen and shown what was important to the family, which was basically doing things for people and trying to make India into the nation of their dreams. Never saying that to us, but we always saw around us people committed to something much larger than their own bank balances, much larger than their own celebrity status. Amma working so hard and so much physical work that I felt I never wanted to be a dancer. Papa always being away in later years, always babysitting till I was 12 years old, and Amma being on tour, but always being told that we had minds and we needed to use them, that we had hearts and we needed to use them, and that we were in a position of great privilege, not from the money point of view, but from the education point of view, from the point of view of the kind of people Kartikeya, my brother, and I met on an everyday basis. We were encouraged always to participate in adult discussions. We were never told, this is not for you, or don't get into this, you don't know anything about it. Never, ever. Which is perhaps why I jump in to give my opinion all the time.
So what was your reaction when you saw Ishwak and Regina on screen?
You know, I have known Ishwak for over 10 years. He used to work with Arvind Gaur, who is a very dear friend, and Arvind's company Asmita and Darpana do similar work in using the theatre and the arts for social change. They do mostly work on the streets, but they also do some extraordinary plays. So Arvind has directed with me. Ishwak has come and performed here. So I was delighted because he was somebody that I could speak to. And I spoke to him at great length about the expression of Papa's eyes, which was always curious and innocent and believing, and always with a sense of mischief. And all through the shooting, I went on talking to him, and I think he has achieved that. So I'm very happy with the way Ishwak has dealt with the role. And so are most people who have known my father.
So great scientists have always had very high regards for the arts and vice versa. So how did this amalgamation happen in your house?
At the entrance of Darpana, our institution, are two huge photographs. One of my mother, which says Mrinalini Sarabhai, the scientist, and the other of Papa, which says Vikram Sarabhai, the artist. And when people first come in, they think, oh, typo. Of course not, because there are other sides to them. Papa loved the arts. Papa loved dancing. Papa loved music. He was thrilled that Amma was a dancer, that she felt as strongly about him. Amma, although she said she didn't know any science, in fact, Bharatanatyam and Indian music are just pure mathematics. She also corrected every single scientific paper of his and would often turn to him and say, Vicky, is this science or English? So they were both very proud of each other. They were both deeply committed to their own careers. They did not feel insecure about the other. And I think it's a very important epitome to hold up to families today where the woman is ambitious and committed to her own career. So when we were children, Amma was the one touring the most and Papa had to babysit. Papa was happy to babysit because they had decided that one of them would always be with us till I was 12 years old. I'm the younger one. And so it was invariably Papa. When I got into a scrape, when I got into problems in school, if I got into any kind of hassle, it was always Papa who used to come. And I think, you know, when we are talking of so many women coming out with their own career goals, their own career motivations, and so many men feeling deeply troubled, deeply insecure, I think this kind of a relationship is important to hold up. That if you are really happy and satisfied in your own career, then you don't need to feel insecure, because you really don't have time for it. You are so deeply in your own thing, in your own search, in your own path, that insecurity comes when you're empty inside. If you are doing something that fills you with joy, and if you are doing it for a larger purpose, there is really little room for that kind of emptiness.
So, Rabindranath Tagore has always obviously had a very deep connection with your mother, but I was also hearing an interview where she said that he, in fact, blessed Dr. Sarabhai as a child. So, can you share the story and the
The
association with it?
Sarabhais, the Sarabhais as a family were very close to the Tagores. And every time Gurudev came to Gujarat, he would stay with my grandfather. And on holidays to Darjeeling and so on, Dadaji and the family would stay with Gurudev's family. So there was a very deep relationship. Amma's was later, actually, when she went to Shantiniketan, but the Sarabhais and the Tagores were very close friends. And apparently, and this is noted by a British teacher in his diaries of when Papa was 2 years old, Gurudev came and he picked Papa up, and Gurudev was a phrenologist. He read faces. And he said to my Dadaji that, Ambalal, this child will either become a sage or a scientist.
And there's also a connect with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that your family shares. So, can you
Very
share?
much so.
Yes.
Very much so. My Mausi, Amma's elder sister, Lakshmi Sehgal, was a gynecologist. During the war, was in Singapore. Netaji was forming the INA. Somebody introduced them, and Netaji apparently turned to her and said, why don't you come and join and start a women's wing? So she, in fact, became the commander-in-chief of what became the Rani Lakshmibai unit of the INA, and worked very closely, so much so that my cousin Subhashini is named after Subhash Bose as well. And Netaji had 3 lieutenants, all 3 of whom were tried in the Red Fort. And one of them, Prem Sehgal, was the one that Lakshmi Mashi got married to. There was Sehgal, Shahnawaz, and Dillon were the 3 who were tried by the British. And Uncle Prem was one of them, and they became a family. So yes, Netaji was very much part of our life. And recently, over the last, I think during the COVID period, this RPM record has surfaced of Lakshmi Mashi actually singing the entire Janagana Mana, which was the national song of the INA, not the little snippet that we sing as our national anthem. And it's a beautiful recording, and it was wonderful that it was found.
So both Dr. Sarabhai and Homi Bhabha's world talks of a very different form of patriotism than we see today. So what was their idea of India like?
Gandhiji and Tagore had a great difference in their idea of nationalism and patriotism. For Tagore, there were no boundaries. Patriotism meant being the beloved of and having as a beloved your land. But his definition of your land was not restricted. Gandhiji felt nationalism was fighting for the country. Today, what is called patriotism and Desh Bhakti is jingoism. It is hatred of the others. It is building walls. And I don't think that has anything to do with being patriotic. Patriotism doesn't come from fear or hatred. Today, saying Jai Shri Ram comes from hatred and patriotism of a completely false nature. It cannot come out of insecurity. I was talking about insecurity earlier. This comes out of insecurity, vileness, and hatred. Papa and Homi and Amma and so many others wanted to not only build India into a great nation, but build for humanity. It was not for India. It was for India first, but not limited to India, because they felt that anything that could be contributory to India would also contribute to the world. And in some senses, the one thing that I disagree with the Rocket Boys is that they bring in the concept of India much more than it was in the eyes of either Homi or Papa. We will do this rocket for India. No, they would do it for India, but it wasn't limited to that. They wanted to show the developing world that a different kind of development was possible, that you didn't have to follow the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps that the West had followed after the Second World War in order to become industrialized, that you could fly in another direction, find alternatives that were cost effective, that did other things besides what the West was doing with something. And I think it was a nationalism which was a humanism, and hatred and insecurity had no part in it. Making divisions, creating walls amongst people, saying all of so and so should be killed or all of so and so should be killed had no part in it, nor does it have any part in my love for India or my love for humanity.
The deaths of both Dr. Homi Bhabha and Vikram Sarabhai were followed by controversies. So was there really a CIA angle to it?
There are papers in the CIA which show that an operative was sent to India from 1966 to 1971, which are the 2 years of death, to eliminate the two most important scientists because they were not willing to ply the path that the United States wanted us to ply for the country. And it seems very likely because Papa was perfectly healthy. And I had seen him 24 hours before he died. Everything was in control. He had just had medical tests done. And the recent findings of the Air India flight that Homi was on that crashed also signaled to the fact that it was in fact rigged to blow up on top of Mont Blanc. So it is very likely. And even then, Mrs. Gandhi was very insistent that we have a post-mortem of Papa's, but neither my mother nor my grandmother wanted it, and they had lost him. And it didn't really matter to them at that point of time. They were not thinking of what history would want. They were thinking of their deep personal loss and the loss to the nation. And they didn't want him cut up and post-mortemed and all that followed. Session said to me many years later, Session, who was election commissioner and one of the most upright men that I know and who would weep at what the election commission is today. Session said to me, he was Secretary of the Atomic Energy and worked closely with Papa, that that and the fact that Mrs. Gandhi was pressurizing Papa to go nuclear, and the fact that he didn't want to go nuclear because he knew that even if we developed nuclear for non-proliferation, for electricity and so on, there would be a time when a hawkish government would push us into making a bomb. So he was not willing to have that done. And I think that pressure also must have weighed on him very, very dearly.
So last question, can you tell us a little more about what we can expect in the second season of Prophet Boys?
I can't. I absolutely cannot, except that there's much more of the wonderful relationship that Papa and Amma shared, and Papa's concern with the family, and Papa's encouragement and nourishing of Amma's career and of the institution Darpana that I now head. But I can't tell you more. Okay. Wait till October.
Right, so we kind of got the date there. But,
okay.
Thank you so much for your time.